Okay, in this lecture module called Market Failure and the Coase Theorem, we're going to explore market failure. And the Coase Theorem was discovered by someone by the name of Ronald Coase, who won the Nobel Prize in economics. This is Ronald Coase. He's a very interesting person. You'll see the nature of the firm, the theory of the firm. In microeconomics, we'll be talking about the firm. And then in the Coase theorem comes from 1960. Yeah, nature of the firm, we'll be discovering the firm in microeconomics, and then the problem of social cost. That's where the Coase theorem comes from. And so you'll see the last thing they've got in this book, 1994. So Coase had been writing for 60 years. So let's discover market failure and the Coase theorem. Okay. Market failure and the Coase theorem. The object of analysis is the plastic pencils market. So when you start with this perfect competition, supply and demand graph, when you start to make analytical assumptions, reducing human behavior down to 2 dimensions, Cartesian plane, we assume in this market analysis that all the costs and benefits are contained within the exchange, within the market exchange. But sometimes you can have market failures. There can be negative externalities and positive externalities. For example, a negative externality in the plastic pencils market might be pollution. People who live near the manufacturing plant for plastic pencils, there might be affluent pollution affecting the surrounding neighborhoods. And that would be a negative externality, that pollution. And so the cost of the pollution is not captured in the market. So that's a market failure, a negative externality. So there's 2 ways to deal with this negative externality: command and control, where the state decides who can pollute when and how much. And the first thing we ask is pollution itself, the emissions that come out of a factory, is wasted energy. So there's something going on. I don't know, I wasn't there. Something going on why the plants are not capturing that pollution in the first place. But that being said, so now the people in the neighborhood are being negatively affected. So the state could say, okay, plant, we're going to put a limit on how much pollution you can make, right? But they don't know, and that's the Hayekian knowledge problem. The regulators, command and control the state, they don't know the manufacturing systems that are going on in the plant and how much pollution is efficient or inefficient. So another way that you can deal with this negative externality in this example is through voluntary exchange, or the Coase theorem. By expanding property rights, introducing self-interest, you can improve the outcome over the command and control solution, because you're then introducing residuals, in other words, self-interest, instead of the state, who has nothing to gain or lose except just expanding their power. By expanding the self-interest property rights regime, you're then reducing, making a more efficient economy and creating more well-being, reducing absolute poverty. So what you could do is allow let's say this is you would expand the property rights regime. So now those people who are being affected, so in order to be able to capture all the costs and benefits, so now all of these people who are being affected by the pollution can now negotiate with the plant saying, okay, your pollution is causing me this much harm, I want you to reimburse me. And then they work it out in voluntary exchange and mutual agreement to then expand the property rights and create efficiency and well-being. You also have positive externalities. For example, in the Forest Hills Tennis Stadium, they have concerts there. And so you can go outside and listen. One of my favorite bands, The Replacements, played there. And I didn't want to be in a big crowd and, you know, and all of that, but I could hear, I could go outside. A friend of mine who lives in Forest Hills, we went out and we were able to listen to The Replacements for free. So that was a positive, and then see it on YouTube later. And so that's a positive next externality. But if somebody doesn't like The Replacements and all that noise is coming out of the stadium, well, then that would be a negative externality for them. Again, subjective utility. I'll give you a quick example, real life example. A friend of mine, the names are changed to protect the innocent. A friend of mine named Stefan from France came to the United States to study sociology. And his job, his work in Washington, D.C. was as a sociologist. He was a specialist, an expert on motorcycle safety issues. So what he would do is he would do independent assessments of the Department of Education's motorcycle safety programs, of course, telling the state what they want to hear, that, oh yes, your programs are great, you should do more of them and get more money from Congress. But he got tired of doing that, so he decided to open a vineyard. He's being French after all. A vineyard in Northern Virginia. And his neighbor grew flowers. So what would happen is the flower grower next door would put on pesticides so that his flowers would grow well, but then the pesticides would go over and damage Stefan's grapes. So one way to handle it is for Stefan and his neighbor to work it out together. Say, maybe you spray your pesticides when the wind is going this way, or when my grapes, let's work it out together. Or let's say that your pesticides damage some of my grapes, you should reimburse me. So that's expanding the copyrights regime, or the property rights regime, to work it out voluntarily together through self-interest and negotiation, voluntary exchange. The other way is for Stefan to go to the state, or in this case, the county, and tell them, oh, my neighbor is damaging my grapes, and then they would go in and tell him to stop doing business, and then both parties lose, right? So who decides how and with what knowledge are these decisions made? Coase tells us that if you expand the property rights and allow exchange, you improve efficiency and well-being. Thank you. That completes our lecture module on market failure and the Coase theorem.